Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Arnold Palmer Data Dive Show. We have a lot to cover. We're going to take our first look at the forecast for the week. It is quite an adventurous one. Do have some data to cover. We're going to dig in deep to the prior Arnold Palmer Invitationals, see what kind of shots and skill sets that we're looking for this week, and of course the players that have those skill sets. We have a lot to cover. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out fantasynational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where normally I post research every Monday afternoon regarding the tournament, some course info, previous patterns of winners. Didn't do that this week as I am still working my way back from recovery of basically my entire show with my computer crashing last week. So didn't have a chance to do that this week. But normally, if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see those pieces of information, go give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. Really cannot recommend it enough. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. So make sure you are subscribed to his article. It is free to do, by the way. And show him some support, following him over on social media. And then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. I heard from some of you last night, but would still appreciate hearing on your end how the audio quality, the video quality is, since I am still, again, working back from data recovery, essentially. So let me know how the quality of the show is. And then moving forward, specifically for the Arnold Palmer, who are you targeting this week? Who are you staying away from? What do you think of the pricing structure? Have you checked that out yet? I would love to hear all of your thoughts regarding Bay Hill and the Arnold Palmer Invitational. So feel free to jump in chat. And if you aren't able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2025 Arnold Palmer Invitational. And we are going to start at the extended forecast over at Windfinder. And as I mentioned, it is quite an adventurous one, I think is probably the best way to describe it. Thursday looks like the wind is going to pick up quite a bit as I figure out where my mouse is here. Wind's going to be pretty high on Thursday. Sustained winds into the mid to upper teens, gusts into the 20s. Does look like the wind's supposed to die off. That's quite a visual right there. The camera is lagging. Let me see if I can fix that for you all. Looks like it's back now, but that was quite a visual for you all. Let me see if I've got this selected the right way I need to. Yeah, it's disabled. Okay. Well, for some reason the camera decided just to lag right on a very flattering expression that I had. So I hope you all enjoyed that. But as I was talking about, it's frozen again. As I was mentioning, winds in the sustained winds into the teens, gusts into the 20s on Thursday. Looks like it's going to be a pretty difficult day at Bay Hill. Thursday looks hectic. Friday and Saturday look fine. Look very calm winds. The temperature looks like it's going to rise a little bit, maybe up into the 80s, low 80s. And then Sunday looks horrendous. Not necessarily a lot of rain, just a lot of wind. And it's going to make it very, very difficult. Yeah, I'm just going to have to hide that camera for now. It is not wanting to cooperate. So with that, we see that the forecast is not conducive for some very low scoring. So as I mentioned last night, we are going to probably be looking at a lot of difficult settings this week for Bay Hill. With that, we will now move to Fantasy National. And the players in the field this week for the Arnold Palmer, because of that forecast that we just saw in Windfinder. You see, I have the moderate and windy conditions filter selected. In moderate and windy conditions, our top performers in the field this week at the API: Scotty, Adam Scott, Sahith Theegala, Denny McCarthy, Xander, Russell Henley, Sam Burns, Billy Horschel, Siwoo Kim, and Andrew Novak. Those are your top 10 in terms of moderate and windy condition top performers in those situations. Because of that forecast, we're definitely going to lean into the difficult relative to par. So, win rounds have been difficult relative to par in the past 13 months or so. Your top performers are Scotty, Xander, Rory, Russell Henley, Ludwig Aubert, Colin Morikawa, Akshay Bhatia, Billy Horschel, Andrew Novak, Corey Connors, and Christian Bezaidnote, Seabez. I really apologize trying to work through some of this stuff from recovering from the dying PC last week. There's a look at our top performers when rounds have been difficult relative to par. I'm just going to remove myself. It's going to make it easier. Okay. With that, we're now going to move to Microsoft Excel. We have a decent idea or overview. We looked at some wind. We looked at difficult relative to par. We could look at long courses, but as I mentioned last night, I'm thinking we're just going to look at difficult relative to par, that filter, most of this week. So with that, we'll move to Microsoft Excel. And we're going to take a deep dive into Bay Hill and figure out the different shots and skill sets that players who have traditionally performed well at Bay Hill, what they've been doing well, and who we might want to focus on this week. So with that, the Arnold Palmer, as you see here, at Bay Hill, I was hoping, well, you can see the majority of it there. Okay, the Bay Hill, you see off the tee, pretty heightened here in terms of importance against the average full field course. 15% more important. I will encourage you to or remind you that last year this was such a small field with the signature event status. All of these had about 110, 120 players, and that's why some of these numbers are quite larger than last year. We had this situation with Pebble Beach, and you notice that I removed all of the preceding years for Pebble Beach. Now that we've had 2 years of designated status, and just left it at that. So we'll take a look at Bay Hill in a full 5 years since, but after this week, I'm going to limit it to the 2 years like I did for Pebble Beach. With Bay Hill, you see off the tee, pretty darn important. Like we just saw, 15% more important than the average full field event. Now the approach looks like it's fairly middling in terms of importance. Hey Saul, thanks for jumping in chat, much appreciated. I apologize that the camera is not on, although that's probably better viewing for you all, honestly. But I'm having some camera issues, working my way back from the from the PC, from my computer dying last week. That's why there were no shows last week. Really appreciate you jumping in chat. I would like your feedback on how the audio quality is, the video quality. Even though I don't have my camera going, how does it look and sound on your end? But very much appreciated for jumping into chat this evening. Hopefully we're ready for a big week, because it is a double tournament week. Looking to rebound this week with Akshay and Ludwig. I don't hate that. We'll be digging into a lot of the data here, or we were actually in at the beginning of it. Ludwig makes a whole lot of sense. Big, long, straight off the tee. We'll be looking into some of his prior performance. Akshay has played well to start this year. I don't know how I feel about Akshay. But that's why we go through all of this data and figure out who we might want to focus on. So you see that the approach looks like it might be picture and sound are good. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me know that. Yeah. The approach looks like it's slightly mitigated here, but again, I will remind you that all of these values are deflated last year because of the very limited field, 70 to 75 players or whatever we had. If you extrapolate this 1.62 out over, the historical 110 players, you're looking at, roughly about what we'd had, which is about 2.5, which would be, about 1 to 2%. We're not going to ignore the approach this week. Ball striking is still going to be very, very important. We're going to skip ahead just a little bit, mostly probably in this 200 plus proximity, but we're definitely not going to ignore the irons, but we are looking at ball strikers this week. I know I say that a lot, unless a course really demands a lot of short game. We're going to be looking at ball striking. We're not going to ignore the around the green either. Bay Hill is an extremely tough test of golf. Players are going to rely on their around the green game quite a bit this week. You see it's about 1% more important. Now the putting, little bit misleading in my opinion, considering it looks like it's not a very important factor at all. This is all data for the players that have historically finished top 30. And you see it's really deflated for players, or at least for last year, considering the limited field. But if we remove that, extremely low outlier, it's going to come up closer, much closer to full field event average. So we're going to look at all 4 of these strokes gained. And we did this with the Farmers. And we did this with the Genesis especially. The Genesis was a very good tournament for me, as I hit the Ludwig outright, but DFS was a really good success that week as well. And I have a feeling that I'm going to have a very big mixed condition model. If I remember correctly from the Genesis week, we had something like 14 metrics in the mixed condition model for the Genesis. I'm feeling like it's going to be a big mixed condition model again this week, because Bay Hill is pretty darn close to a major setup. It is just long, it's difficult. Players are tested throughout their entire game. So we're going to have the emphasis on the ball striking for sure, but we're not going to ignore around the green or the putting. Moving to distance and greens and whatnot. Again, this distance looks like, you can see it's a huge outlier just from years prior. Distance is a big factor around Bay Hill. Now, some players do choose to be much more prudent off the tee, hitting 3-woods and whatnot, but there is a considerable advantage for players like Rory, for players like Scotty, and you've seen year over year, Scotty plays well here, Rory's played well here. These long hitters off the tee definitely have an advantage, and you see that carried out in years prior as well. So we're definitely going to have a focus on the distance, and honestly, that's why I'm pretty big on off the tee in general, because off the tee combines your driving distance and your fairways. Because fairways are going to be somewhat important too. I just don't think it's going to be as important as some people might suggest, because players are choosing to be more prudent, hitting 3-woods off the tee and laying back to easier portions of the fairway, giving themselves longer irons in. So that's why I'm thinking we're going to be looking at distance mostly. Greens, we might have in the mixed condition, we might not. But hitting greens here is not easy. It's not easy, despite them being the second largest greens on the PGA Tour so far in 2025. I still think greens are, I just think greens are going to be important to hit. Obvious statements are obvious, but these greens aren't easy to hit in general. And in fact, I'll just prove that very quickly. I know the vision's skewed, but you see green and regulation percentage much lower here. Much lower here. So hitting greens, a player that is able to hit greens is going to have a considerable leg up on the rest of the field. Moving into scoring, more often than not, the more consistent metric is bogey avoidance, and the spikeability or the highest raw values come in the birdies gained. It's actually not the case. Bogey avoidance slightly more consistent, although it's kind of all over the place for both of them. But the higher raw numbers come in the bogey avoidance. So pars are generally good scores around Bay Hill, with the exception of the par fives. So we're gonna be looking at a lot of bogey avoidance this week around Bay Hill. Moving into the par threes, 4s, and 5s is where kind of the meat and the potatoes are for this kind of data. Seeing where the strokes gained come in these various lengths, you see the majority of the par threes, 2/3 roughly of the par threes, fall in the 200 to 225, but it's not so overwhelming that it's the only range we want to look at. Because they do play short sometimes. They move that 199 down under 175 from time to time, especially if the wind is really picking up. So I can see that happening maybe a day or two. They also have some very long par threes, or at least one on the scorecard measuring 231. So as of right now, I would think we're going to look at all of par threes, but the most important facet of the par threes would be the 200 to 225. It looks like, as 2/3 fall there. Par fours, pretty evenly split, to be honest with you. Despite the fact that 5 of the 10 par fours fall from 450 to 500, despite the fact that half of them fall into this range, you actually see here the 400 to 450 is where it's at in terms of the most. So any par 4 any par 4 metrics we look at, we're probably just going to look at total, because I don't think I want to look at 5% in each of these. I just don't. So this actually might be a case where we just don't have any par 4s in the mixed condition model, especially because they're 10% less important than the average full field course. Yeah, we might be skipping the par 4s in general, considering the 400 to 450 is, surprising to me, the highest of these three ranges. I would not have guessed that, but data shows what it shows. And then lastly, the par 5s, no surprise here, 3 of the 4 par 5s fall to this range. We do have one, big extreme outlier here, but even so, probably looking at 550 to 600 would be my guess. Now, it is interesting that they do shorten the very short par 5 here. I think it's 511 on the scorecard. They do shorten that under 500. 150 to 250 approach. I don't disagree. We'll hit the proximity here momentarily. But it looks like par 5s would be in the 550 to 600, which is where 3/4 of the par 5s fall. And then to your point, the proximity raw numbers might not mean a lot, but this 200 plus number is rather large. Is rather large. If we look at compared to other full field courses, you see that the total procs is exactly full field average for the PGA Tour. Where you're making up a lot is in the 200 plus, 38% more important. So that's a combination of the par 5 scoring and the few long par 4s that are here. Interestingly enough, the 150 to 200 range does look like it doesn't provide a whole lot, at least for players that have historically finished in the top 30. But definitely the 200 plus. Definitely the 200 plus. So that's why I'm pretty big, Saul, on par 5s, because those are the 4 best scoring opportunities around Bay Hill. And then adding the 200 plus for some of those longer par 4s. So there's a look at the detailed data regarding Bay Hill the past 5 years. A little bit not apples to apples, if you will, considering this was such a smaller field than the previous 4 years. But that's all we have to go on. And then, much like what I have done with Pebble Beach, we'll limit it to 2 years starting next year with its designated event status. But I wanted to include all 5 years just to get a good feel for how Bay Hill is played before we start limiting data. So there's a look at the detailed data regarding Bay Hill to focus on par 5 scoring. Yeah. In fact, we'll go back to the web page view. We'll see if. Sorry, I'm going to bring that camera back. My camera's been lagging. I might try and see if it stays up. But to your point there, we looked at a little bit this last night. Par 5s are where it's at. They're the 4 easiest scoring opportunities. 3rd easiest hole, 4th easiest hole, 2nd easiest hole, and easiest hole. Now, there's not a whole lot of eagles, with the exception of the 16th. But half a shot, quarter of a shot, 15 hundredths, and 2/10. Your 4 best scoring opportunities are on the par 5s. And as we move on the leaderboard, the top 10s, the top 5s, and our winners consistently have been the best on par 5s. So that's why we're going to have a big focus on par 5s this week. Because the rest of the course is really difficult. I mean, the par 3s are extremely difficult. 4th toughest. Plays a little bit over par here, the par 3 7th. 15 hundredths, and then 2/10 over par. So long, difficult par 3s here at Bay Hill. Okay, with some of the metrics that we have looked at, thanks to Microsoft Excel and looking back at some historical data, I'm going to keep this difficult relative to par filter on. You see the camera is still lagging and whatnot. So I'm going to try to have a little bit less movement. Hopefully it doesn't freeze, but it doesn't look like it's cooperating still. I'm going to keep this difficult relative to par filter on. Your top off the tee players in the field this week. Yeah, I'm just going to have to turn this camera off. Too distracting, and I don't want to lessen the experience for you all as the viewers. Your top off the tee players, when rounds have been difficult in the past 13 months or so: Rory, Ludwig, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Minwoo Lee, Sahith Theegala, Akshay Bhatia, Sam Burns, Ben An, and Scotty. So the 2 players that you mentioned, Saul, definitely up there and off the tee, which is a good start to that line of thinking. Ludwig makes a whole lot of sense. I don't think Akshay has played here, but maybe last year? No, in fact, he did not play last year in the Arnold Palmer Invitational. I would have thought he did. He did not. So it doesn't look like he's ever been to Bay Hill. If I just search API, yeah. Not. So he is a debutante. Now, granted, he has played very, very well the past couple of weeks. Didn't play the Cognizant, but top 10 the Genesis, top 10 Mexico. His off the tee game hasn't been as strong as what you might think, but he's been putting a lot better. And Akshay has traditionally not been the best putter. If his putter continues to be hot, I don't hate it. Narrow fairways, exactly. I mentioned this last night when we looked in the GCSA tournament fact sheet. By the tournament fact sheet's notes, these fairways were fairly wide, 30 yards wide on average is what it said. I thought that was pretty misleading because they do not play that wide with dog legs, shortcuts, water, forced carry over water. I think the fairways play much more narrow than their yardage suggests. So I do worry about Batia a little bit in that regard. If we look at like his distance and accuracy, he's been pretty accurate lately, but he's also been in good form. I always thought of Batia being much more of a longer hitter, but it looks like he's had more of an emphasis on accuracy lately. So interesting. That's a misconception that I have had. So maybe not the worst idea there, Saul, with that. We'll move to approach now, and we're just going to look at 2025. I just want to see the in-form iron players. Who's been best with their irons in 2025 in the first 8 to 9 events. So in that time frame, since the beginning of this calendar year, your top iron players have been Justin Thomas, Nick Taylor, Scotty Scheffler, JJ Spawn, Mav McNeely, Sepp Straka, Colin Morikawa, Tommy Fleetwood, Hideki, and Joe Highsmith. Research says it was narrowed to 20 yards in 2020 because Rory destroyed it in 19. That sounds familiar. Tournament history, and then we'll take a look at 2019. I felt like, 2019's winner was Francesco at minus 12. I don't know, in 2020 it was very difficult. 2018, okay, Rory at 18. So 2018, Rory. I vaguely remembered Rory playing extremely well in the late teens. I didn't know exactly which year, but minus 18. That seems like it's an outlier. So you might be onto something there with Saul, because the winning score generally, like, yes, you see 15 from Scotty, but second place was minus 10. Like, Scotty just blitzed the field last year. 2023 was 9 under from Kitayama, 5 under from Scotty, 11. Like, it doesn't get into the 18s like it did for Rory that year. 11 from Leishman the year prior to Rory winning. 17 from Day. A little bit of an outlier. So, again, all I can go by is what the GCSIA tournament fact sheet had, which I'll zoom. Well, I don't think I need to zoom in. Hopefully you all can see that. It says it's 30 yards average fairway width, but again, I thought that was very misleading, considering the forced carries, the dog legs. So they play much more narrow in my mind, and that's why off the tee in general as a statistic, both length and accuracy, I think is going to play a pretty big deal this week. But there are your top approach players in the field this week. We're definitely not going to ignore around the green. I'm going to bring back 2024 data, and we're going to look at difficult. When scoring's difficult, who can scramble, who can get, play well around the green. Davis Thompson, Hideki, Scotty, Rory, Seabez, Siwoo Kim, Denny McCarthy, Max Homa, Sam Burns, Stephen Yeager, and Nick Taylor are your top around the green performers when it's difficult. And then lastly, we'll take a look at putting in a couple of different ways. First, I'm just going to look at Fast and Lightning Bermuda. Considering these greens are notoriously fast, they are often compared to Augusta, even though those are bent. We're talking just purely in terms of speed here. I'm actually going to include 2023 just to give these players enough rounds to make it statistically significant. So your top putters in the past 2+ years on Fast and Lightning Bermuda have been Mav McNeely, Ben Griffin, Sahith Theegala, Sam Burns, Matt Fitzpatrick, Wyndham Clark, Tommy Fleetwood, Xander, Denny McCarthy, and Seabez. Those are your top 10 on terms of Fast and Lightning Bermuda greens. Now, what I am going to do, actually, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to do one more thing with that. So let me check that again. We'll go Bermuda, Fast and Lightning down here. And we're going to look at some spike putting just very, very quickly. We're going to set this at 3. So the players most often gaining 3 strokes or more in a round on Fast and Lightning Bermuda greens. Those players are, let's see, Grazerman's at the top here. So Grazerman's done it in 20%. So a little bit smaller of a sample size. He's only played 6 rounds on Fast and Lightning Bermuda, but he's gained 3, supposedly in 2 of the 6. I see 1 of 5. Okay. Unless I put 2.5. No, I got 3 there. So Grazerman at 20%. You got Jacob Bridgman, Mav McNeely, and Wyndham Clark. Those are your players that have spiked most often on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. Would you mind doing a deep dive into Michael Kim? Just personally cheer for him and hope he does well. Yeah, we can do that. Let me finish the putting real quick, and then I'll get into him. So there's your top spike putters on Fast and Lightning Bermuda, starting with Grazerman, Bridgman, McNeely, Clark. Some players who have not spiked very much. Hoagie, no surprise. Ben On, no surprise. Cameron Young, not the best putter. Surprisingly, look at Denny McCarthy. Denny McCarthy, for as much as he's a very good putter, he is not spiked on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. He's got several rounds where he gains, and he gains quite a bit, like the Players last year. Basically 2.5 in a round, 1.5 in a round. But very rarely does he go nuclear. Very rarely does he go over 3. Wells Fargo once. And then there should be, or maybe that is his only round, considering it's only at 2%. Yeah. Okay. So interesting to see that. Siwoo. Only because you just mentioned him, we'll take a look at Michael Kim if I can find him. He might be 0. He is at 0. So not a great start in that regard. In 30 rounds on Fast and Lightning Bermuda, he's never gained 3. He's had a few rounds where he's gained a little bit more than 1.5. He had a 2.5 at the Valspar a couple years ago, but he hasn't spiked. So whatever stock you want to put in to spiking or spike putters, there's that. Then the last thing I want to cover in terms of putting, and I'll grab my notes here. We're going to look at some specific course data. So let's look at Bay Hill, obviously where we are this week. We're going to look at Tiff Eagle Bermuda. specifically. So Bay Hill, we're going to look at the Plantation course at Kapalua. That is, those greens are also Bermuda, although they're slow Bermuda. We're going to look at PGA National, the Champion course, Port Royal, which is the host of the Bermuda Championship in the fall. And then lastly, Sea Island, host of the RSM. We want just Seaside. Here are your top putters in the past. Well, I thought I was going to get to that. It doesn't look like it's going to let me do that. Let's try this one more time. I had this issue before. Let's go. We might just have to look at a real big picture view, like career-wise. Plantation, PGA National. I'm pretty sure it's the first one. I'll click both just in case. Plantation course at Kapalua, Port Royal, and Sea Island, Seaside. This will be for a whole player's career. I apologize, but Fantasy National kind of spazzed when I tried to select a specific season. So, on specifically Tiff Eagle Bermuda, your top putters have been Matt Fitzpatrick, Sam Burns, Denny McCarthy, Wyndham Clark, Harris English, Jason Day, Patrick Rogers, Eric Cole, Seabez, Christian Bezuidenhout, and Ben Griffin. But I'm probably mostly looking at Fast and Lightning Bermuda for the mixed condition model. Okay, you wanted to take a look at Michael Kim. So let's do that. 7,600 Michael Kim. He has not been the best putter on Bermuda. I mean, granted, he's just been field average. There's no denying the fact that he is in excellent form right now. Top 10 at PGA National last week. Runner-up at Waste Management. A couple of top 15s in between there. You like the fact that his ball striking is solidly in form. The difference with him and Batia, like Batia was only gaining one. I think he might have had a tournament where he gained 1.5 off the tee. Like Michael Kim's gained 3 a couple of times, and the irons have been blisteringly hot. 2.5, 1.5, 2, 5. You like to see all of that. His Arnold Palmer record, he did top 20 this a few years ago. Missed the cut, so it's pretty middling, I would say, especially because it goes so far back that I'm actually not going to include it in my data, in my sample size when we get to Wednesday night, because I only go back 5 years. So none of this will be factored in. I do know his long iron game is pretty solid. Just very quickly, we'll take a look at proximity. We're mainly looking at 200 plus if Fantasy National will cooperate here. Looking at 200 plus, he's been pretty solid the past couple. Generally, that's where he's at his best, as you can see here, especially like the last 20. His long iron game's pretty solid. If you think he has a little bit more distance, 175 to 200 has also been okay. I don't hate it. If we're talking purely in terms of DFS, Saul, again, this is Monday night. I'll really dig deep tomorrow and Wednesday. I don't hate it. My concern is he's going to be fairly popular because he's in such good form right now. Looking around him, Batia, somebody else you mentioned, is similarly priced. Minwoo Lee has been very solid lately as well. Coming off a top 15. He had a top 15 at the Waste Management, top 20, another signature event. And I don't think anybody denies the fact that Minwoo Lee is a lot longer a lot better off the tee player than Michael Kim is. Min Woo's big weakness has always been his irons. If he gains one like he did at PGA National last week, he'd be a force to contend with. Like there's a few players in and around Michael Kim's price that makes me not necessarily shy away from Michael Kim. It's just he wasn't my first thought in that price range. And I know that's probably not the deep statistical dive that you wanted, or full statistical dive. That's my first thoughts on Michael Kim. I don't hate it, especially because he's been playing really well lately. I do worry that he's going to be pretty popular, at least in thinking about how I think the general public, our fellow contestants, are going to build lineups. And of course, we'll confirm this Wednesday in the DFS Tactics show. But I really do think he's going to be pretty popular, would be my guess. And you have to think that Scotty's going to be 35 to 40%. You got to think Rory's probably going to be in that 25 to 30, maybe creep up into the 35% range. If that's the case, our fellow contestants are going to be in the sevens a lot. And, I don't know how our fellow contestants are going to feel about players like Matt Fitzpatrick, Jason Day. I think Minwoo will get some attention, but really I could see Michael Kim garnering a lot based on the style of lineups that I think are going to get built this week. That, and in combination with his good form, I worry about that. Okay, that's a look at our strokes gained. Hey, Derek, good evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. I apologize that the camera, well, it's probably better viewing for you all. It's probably not seeing me, but my camera's acting up. It's been lagging all night, freezing. So I've just turned it off to not be distracting. But it's good to see you this evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. Didn't realize you were doing a video. Thought it was Tuesdays. Appreciate it. Thanks for letting me know on that. My videos always go Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. This week is going to be an exception because it's a double tournament week. I'm actually going to be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Tuesday, tomorrow night, will be completely dedicated to the alternate field event in Puerto Rico. But my normal schedule is Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. But it's good to see you this evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. We'll move to fairways and greens. And again, we're looking at distance mostly. We're going to look at off the tee quite a bit, but we're going to look at distance because there is some forced carry around Bay Hill. You get a lot of advantage. Players like Rory, players like Scotty, who can take lines off the tee that some players simply can't. Let's look at distance. Yeah, I guess I still kind of like this difficult relative to par filter. So when it's difficult, when rounds have been difficult, the past the last 13 months or so, your top distance players in the field this week: Rory, Minwoo Lee, Cam Young, Ben On, Wyndham Clark, Ludwig Aubert, Xander, Max Grazerman, Tony Finau, and Nick Dunlap. Keeping with this difficult relative to par filter, your top greens gained players that are just adept at hitting greens when it's difficult: Scotty, Xander, Ludwig, Sepp Straka, Tony Finau, Andrew Novak, Shane Lowry, Cameron Young, Victor Hovland, and Corey Connors. We didn't mention him when we were talking about Michael Kim, Saul, but Corey Connors is somebody that I kind of like early on this week, who is very similarly priced to Michael Kim. I know he's a couple hundred more, but similarly priced. Corey Connors is somebody that I've had my eye on early on this week. So there's your top greens game players. And because there is quite a bit of water trouble, greens aren't going to get hit as often as players generally do. This is one of the lowest greens hit percentages on the PGA Tour. Your top scramblers when rounds have been difficult: Denny McCarthy, Rory, Hideki, Siwoo, Max Homa, Billy Horschel, Mackenzie Hughes, Sam Stevens, Isaiah Salinda, and Brian Campbell. Granted, Salinda and Campbell in much less of a sample size than the others. Okay, we'll move to scoring. We're going to look at bogey avoidance. Pretty simple. Pars are good scorers around Bay Hill. So we're going to look at bogey avoidance, and this is just my preference. I like looking at a scoring metric like bogeys, birdies, opportunities. I like matching that with a scoring filter. Easy, difficult, etc. Not sure if you talked about it today. Are you planning on going with Rory and Scheffler this week? Are you fan? Hard to say. Saul had a pretty good question. He wanted to take a deep dive into Michael Kim, which obviously he's been in great form. My concern is because Scotty's going to be 35 to 40%. You'd have to think Rory's going to be 25 to 30, maybe even creeping up into the 35%. I think a lot of our fellow contestants are going to be in the 7Ks this week. I just do. And I think Michael Kim's going to be fairly popular because of that. It'll all depend on how the ownerships start coming in when I start looking at that Wednesday, a little bit tomorrow and then mostly Wednesday. I don't know how you avoid Scheffler. Granted, I said that same thing at Waste Management, and he was very, very middling. So if you have the stones, if you have the cojones to do it, balanced is going to be really, really the contrarian style this week, I think. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but you're going to be really, really unique if you go balanced. But I usually don't really focus on DFS until Wednesday. Pavone seems interesting. He finds a way to play well in tough conditions. I mean, we saw it last year at the Farmers. Having said that, I know he's cheap. Pavone. Where is Pavone? I might have to search for him, not to take up too much time. 62. Like, he just hasn't been good lately. Like, look at the irons. I mentioned this at the Farmers. I mentioned it for the Genesis. Like, his irons have been really bad. Really bad. No worries. Ask any questions. That's why I'm here, is to try and help. And I'll give you, what I think is the correct answer and all that. I generally try not to go too much into DFS until Wednesday night because I haven't really looked at a whole lot of the pricing. I haven't built lineups. So I don't want to lead you as the viewer astray. That's why I kind of like just digging deep into the data on a Monday night, just to get, wrap my head around players and all that stuff. Vaughn this bad, we just stripe in it. Shocked his stats were that bad. I mean, like when he won the Farmers, like he was playing really well. He had a top 10 at the Sony, but you see the irons were really good. He's never been a good around the green player, so you can forgive that. But he was putting well. His irons were in great form, but look at him now. Like this is this year, Century and up. Those irons are horrendous. So there's just not a whole lot to go on there. There really isn't. Anyway, coming back to scoring here. Your top bogey avoiders when rounds have been difficult. Going back to the beginning of 2024. Scotty, Rory, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Siwoo Kim. Interesting. Another player in that mid-7 range like we've been talking about tonight. Max Homa, Ludwig, Denny McCarthy, Tommy Fleetwood, and Russell Henley. We'll move to proximity. Pretty simple. We're just going to look at 200 plus. I think we have enough rounds. Well, maybe. I'll include 2024 just to get a bigger picture view, but I might just use 2025 for the mixed condition model. Your top 200 plus approach players: Xander, Andrew Novak, Tom Hoagie, Robert McIntyre, somebody else that's kind of interesting to me, JJ Spawn, Akshay Bhatia, Tony Finau, Max Grazerman, Ben On, and Victor Hovland. And then quickly we'll go into 3s, 4s, and 5s. Majority of the par 3s come in the 200 to 225. So if you wanted to really be specific, you would focus on this range here, which that is a feather in Michael Kim's cap, Saul, that he is second in the most important range here at Bay Hill. So not anything to scoff at there. But I am going to sort on total par 3s. Xander, Henley, McCarthy, Matt McNeely, Fitzpatrick, Morikawa, Straka, Brian Campbell, Bhatia, and Ludwig Aubert. Of those, actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll just keep 2024. That's fine. Bhatia's not been good at that range. He's been good at almost every other range but 200 to 225. So probably want to make a note of that. But Xander, Henley, McNeely, Fitzpatrick, Ludwig, top 10 in that range, and top 10 in total par 3s. Brian Campbell as well. I'm going to skip par 4s. I just want to go to the par 5s. Par 5s, 550 to 600. Minwoo Lee, Scotty, Davis Thompson, Billy Horschel, Tony Finau, Patrick Cantlay, Nick Dunlap, Sahith Theegala, Jason Day, and Mackenzie Hughes. All right. We're kind of right on time. I don't have an early look file. The only Excel data I had was the deep statistical dive, which was this. So if you missed out on that, I suggest you check that out at the end of the show. But I'll stick around for a couple minutes if anyone has any questions about specific players or want to see something specific as we move forward for the week. Ben Griffin, decent and long irons, might end up being too chalky. Yeah, Ben Griffin. We'll take a look at his proximity metrics here. 200 plus. Ben Griffin. Whoops. Fairly middling in the 200 plus, but he's also been playing really well. No doubt about that. That's an understatement. He's been playing exceptional, to be fair to Ben Griffin. 2 straight top 5s. Irons have been very good in those events. I do worry about his off the tee game, though. Off the tee is going to be very, very important this week. And that's not what he's known for. He's not overly long. And he can get fairly wayward. I do have some concerns with Griffin in that regard. Thoughts on Davis Thompson? I've heard some rumblings about Davis Thompson. Some people really like him. It wasn't a name that immediately came to mind, considering like his 200 plus proximity isn't the best. It just happens to be on the page view that we're on. But he's very good with par 5s, which you have to be here. I do worry about his performance in the wind. Now, Friday and Saturday look pretty calm if conditions, if the forecast holds the way it is right now. Friday and Saturday look good, but he has not been good in the windiest of conditions. Thursday and Sunday look atrocious. It looks very difficult Thursday and Sunday. So I do have some concerns with that. Off the tee has been great lately. What's his performance at the Arnold Palmer? I think he's 2 for 2. Nothing outstanding, but he's made the cut both times. I don't think you're way off base with that. Derek. I don't. What's his price? 72. So another one of these players in the sevens, if we sort on salary. Another one of these players in the sevens that I don't think he's going to be terribly popular, but he probably might not be as unique as you think. Because I think a lot of our fellow contestants are going to be in the sevens a lot, considering Scotty and Rory. I don't know how much ownership Xander's going to get because he's been hurt. So, I mean, how much are our fellow contestants willing to risk going to Xander? I see a lot of ownership in the sevens. Now, it could be spread out among the sevens, but I can see a lot of lineups really utilizing the sevens, especially if they're using Scotty, because I don't think you're going to be able to do a Scotty and a 9K. I just don't. I think you're going to have to go Scotty and 8, maybe even go like Scotty and 4 sevens. Probably. I think those are going to be pretty popular style of lineups this week. I'll try to bring my camera back. You can see it's already frozen even though I just showed it. Again, I apologize for the camera issues. I'll try to have that sorted out by tomorrow night. But that's going to be it for the show this evening. Thanks to Saul and to Derek for jumping in chat. Very, very much appreciated. And thank you for letting me know how the audio, particularly the audio quality, but the audio and visual quality were. Thanks to you two for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking an in-depth look at golf statistics, trying to give you a statistician's view of what he sees, helping us all win a little bit of money in the process, hoping the camera doesn't freeze on the outro. This is a big week. It's a double tournament week, so reminder, I will be live tomorrow for the Puerto Rico Open as the camera freezes on another very flattering pose of mine. But we're going to do the research, the data dive, and DFS for the Puerto Rico Open all tomorrow. All for tomorrow, all geared towards the Puerto Rico Open. I can't stand it. The camera's getting shut off. So I'll be live tomorrow. Make sure you tune into that. If you want to partake in some wagers for the alternate field event or any the DFS contests, I did look at the Puerto Rico Open odds boards. The favorite of the Puerto Rico Open is 20-1. So there's a lot of value there if you're willing to put in the work. And I'll be doing that tomorrow. Hopefully I'll see some of you all tomorrow night. So for all the wagers you have made so far this week for the Arnold Palmer Invitational, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Arnold Palmer Invitational, until I see you tomorrow night for the Puerto Rico Full Show, may all your bets be profitable.